Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to break down one of the most vital parts of the Indian Constitution, especially for any UPSC aspirant, the fundamental rights. And we're going to focus on that core promise of equality.
So, here's how we're going to tackle this. We'll start with the historical struggle for these rights. Then we'll lay down the ground rules with Articles 12 and 13. From there, we'll dive into the soul of equality in Article 14, see how it works in practice, talk about how the Constitution takes on social evils, and then wrap up by looking at how these rights are constantly evolving. Okay, first things first. Let's really get into why these rights aren't just any old rights. We call them fundamental for a reason. They are absolutely essential for the all-around development of every single individual.
Think of it this way. They're the very bedrock of our political democracy. They're there to protect us, the citizens, you could say the little brother, from the potential tyranny of the state, the big brother. They make sure that the government, with all its power, can't just do whatever it wants, and that some of our most basic freedoms are always guaranteed.
And you know, what's so important to remember is that these rights weren't just given to us on a silver platter. They were won. It took centuries of struggle. You can trace this fight all the way back to 1215, when English lords literally forced the king to sign the Magna Carta, then through the French and American revolutions, and right up to India's own freedom movement, where a Bill of Rights was a key demand.
Okay, before we can even get to the rights themselves, we've got to understand two crucial articles that set the stage. Article 12, which tells us who we have these rights against, and Article 13, which is basically their bodyguard.
Now here's a key takeaway for your exam. The state is a deliberately broad term. It's not just talking about the central government in Delhi. Nope. It covers pretty much everything, from your local panchayat right up to a massive public sector company like the Airport Authority of India. It can even include private bodies if they're acting on behalf of the state. And this wide definition is so important because it ensures your rights are protected against a whole range of authorities.
And that brings us to the ultimate safeguard, Article 13. This gives our courts the awesome power of judicial review. What does that mean? It means they can look at any law, and if it messes with your fundamental rights, they can strike it down. And law here is also defined really broadly. We're talking acts of parliament, presidential ordinances, and even old customs that have the force of law.
This leads us straight to the landmark Kesavananda Bharti case, which honestly was a total game changer. This is where the Supreme Court came up with the basic structure doctrine. It said, look, Parliament can amend the Constitution, sure, but it cannot change its core soul, its basic structure. Things like democracy, secularism, and you guessed it, our fundamental rights are part of that core, which puts them beyond Parliament's absolute power to change.
All right, let's get to the heart of it. Article 14. This is the very foundation of our right to equality, and it's got two really powerful ideas working together to make sure things are fair.
Okay, this is a classic distinction you'll see a lot, especially for the exam. First, you've got the British concept, equality before law. It's kind of negative. It means nobody is above the law. Simple. Then you have the American concept, equal protection of laws. This one's positive. It actually commands the state to apply its laws equally in similar situations. The basic idea, likes should be treated alike.
And the Supreme Court has made it crystal clear, time and time again, that this rule of law, a concept famously laid out by A.V. Dicey and baked right into Article 14, is non-negotiable. It's considered part of that basic structure we just talked about, a cornerstone of our democracy that Parliament just can't amend away.
So that's the theory. But how does this grand principle of equality actually play out in everyday life? Well, let's look at how it applies to things like discrimination and getting a government job.
Here it is, the core command. Article 15 stops the state from discriminating against you when it comes to accessing public places. Article 16 takes that idea and applies it to public employment. But for both, and pay close attention here for your exams, the magic word is only. The state can't discriminate only on the grounds of religion, race, caste, sex, or place of birth. That word only is incredibly important.
And this is where things get a little more complex. Because the Constitution is smart. It recognizes that true equality isn't always about treating everyone exactly the same. Sometimes it's about fixing deep-rooted social inequalities. And this opens the door to the whole idea of special provisions and exceptions, which, as you know, is the foundation of India's reservation policy.
Now, you absolutely have to know the Mandala case to understand reservations today. The Supreme Court upheld the 27% quota for other backward classes. But, and this is key, it also put in some really important safeguards. First, it brought in the creamy layer concept to make sure the benefits go to those who really need them, not the well-off. Second, it put a 50% cap on total reservations to balance affirmative action with merit. This case really shaped the entire policy as we know it.
All right, moving on. The Constitution doesn't just set up principles. It goes on the attack. It directly takes on two deep-rooted social problems that have plagued Indian society for centuries: untouchability and hereditary titles.
I mean, this one is as clear as it gets. Article 17 is absolute. There are no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It completely abolishes untouchability in any form and says practicing it is a crime. And this isn't just a nice thought. It has teeth, enforced by laws like the Protection of Civil Rights Act of 1955.
And what this does is signal a huge shift, a move towards a society built on what you do, not who your ancestors were. Article 18 gets rid of all those old feudal and colonial titles like Maharaja or Rai Bahadur that just created artificial social ranks. But it's important to notice what it allows: military ranks, academic titles, and national awards. These are seen as recognizing merit and service, not as hereditary privileges. And this brings us to a final, really crucial point, especially for any aspirant. It's so important to remember that these rights are not just static, dusty words in a book. They are a living, breathing part of our democracy.
So the big takeaway here is that Part 3 of the Constitution isn't set in stone. Whether it's the courts expanding the definition of state or the ongoing debates about reservation, its meaning is constantly being shaped and refined by the Supreme Court and by Parliament. That's what makes it one of the most dynamic and vital areas of study for you.
And that's really the question I want to leave you with. Is this all a settled legacy, or is it a continuous battle? Understanding these rights isn't just about memorizing articles for an exam. It's about appreciating that ongoing conversation that keeps them alive and relevant for our times. And that's a wrap on our explainer.